Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Marketing Water Cooler Podcast. My name is Jeremy Francesi. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out with us for a little bit. Steph, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's kind of gloomy Monday over here in Los Angeles, but
All the Halloween cheer passed us by.
I know. It's
For
Halloween in my soul always.
always. So this will probably come out mid-November, I assume.
Yep.
Cool. I hope everybody's doing really well. Based on when this comes out, we got 60 days left of the year, maybe less than that, right? Close to 6 weeks. And so a couple things we want to talk about. But Steph, what are we going to dive into on this one?
Let's talk about common sense marketing.
Common sense marketing. So, so look, I think sometimes on these episodes, we go down a rabbit hole where we're talking about things. Sometimes it gets like a little businessy. And I think I want to use this episode for 5-6 minutes and really give you some common sense analogy, a framework just to think logically, because we're going into that part of the year where if you're a marketing leader, you're going to go to your board or your executive team and lobby for things and try to frame the relationship on where you think you need to take the marketing direction, with resources and people and tools and systems you need to execute on that. And of course, what budget you need. And I think when we get into that mindset, sometimes I think we check at the door what makes us human. The same way we for 10 years didn't think about like memes and humor driving buying behaviors, but we've seen that that's obviously not the case. It obviously matters because humans are humans no matter where they go, right? A CFO or not, they're still a person. And so let's just make a very simple analogy that I hope gives you a framework to look at how people buy things, because it's how you buy things. It's how Steph buy things. It's how we buy things. Most people, right? And really where this is gonna cover is you buy things very similarly to how you try to self-diagnose medical problems. That's the punchline. If you walk away and shut the episode off now, that's the takeaway. Here's what I mean by that. When you walk into a scenario where you feel scratchy, right? Think about the last time you were sick, right? If you're watching this, think about it, right? If you're listening, just take a second and logically think through the last time you were sick, how you felt, what your course of action was. Pretty predictable, probably. Did you blindly go to the doctor and say, I have no idea, but these are my symptoms, tell me what's wrong? Probably 99% chance no. And if you're sitting there saying, that's exactly what I did, well, welcome to the 1%, my friend. What you probably did was you went online, did a little research. Maybe you went in some groups or looked around and you tried to piece together symptoms, right? You went on WebMD and you figured out, well, I either haven't drank water in 2 weeks, I'm dehydrated, or I am extremely sick, right? It's like typically one of the two options, right? Maybe you talk to friends, call mom or dad, call your brother, sister. You say, I don't know what's happening, right? You go so far before talking to a medical professional. And then when you walk into the room, you come in with 9, 14 syllable words with I think this is what's wrong with me. And you almost self-diagnose yourself, right? Where I think it's this, I think it's that, maybe it could be this. What do you think? That's how buyers buy things. They don't walk into rooms. You don't walk into rooms with vendors completely unclear on what is happening with you. That's not your first step in the journey of solving a problem. You go online, you do some research, you talk to some friends, whether that's a group or it's a text with your best friend. Hey, we hung out on Friday and I'm not feeling well. Did you catch anything? Right? You start to feel out what's happening around you with people you trust in places you know to get good information or where you believe to be good information. And you build a framework around it so you have an ability to move forward with confidence. When people buy things, they do the same exact thing. They don't go to the doctor and say, I have no idea. I woke up 1 hour ago and came here first. It's not the first stop in the journey. They go online. They talk to people they care about. They go through this information discovery process to figure out if they can do it themselves without having to go through and really intervene. Can I make progress without external intervention, without going to see a doctor, without paying to see a doctor? When you go buy things, you do the same thing. So you're going to go through year-end conversations with your board, and they're going to talk about where to spend money and where you can prove it will make more money, and attribution softwares and proof of if it comes in here, then therefore it's this. We got a lead from the website, therefore it's SEO. And I just want you to, in your heart of hearts, think about how you actually buy things, how you actually consume information, how you actually go and solve problems in your life. Do you go to the person immediately, first stop in the journey, that's selling you something to solve something? You don't. The first stop's never the doctor. It's never. Maybe it's the family friend that's a doctor, right? It's never the doctor. And so I'm going to open it up in a sec to Steph, see if she has anything to share, but I really want it to be simple. People buy solutions and services the same way you diagnose medical issues. You go as far as you could possibly go on your own before you bring in another person. You go as far as you can before you go and stop by the doctors and stop your day to go to that appointment. Now, everybody goes for different things for different information, different sources for different information. But the challenge comes down to when that's your process and then you leave that at the door and you start marketing like, well, they're going to come to us when they need help, right? Why? Right? Why would they go directly to the person selling them something when the world has everything they need available for free on their own time? So when you go talk to your board and you're talking to leadership and you're trying to explain why you need content, why you need to start a podcast, why your ABM strategy shouldn't be banner retargeting ads, it should be, let's build a framework where we can interview the top 200 people we need to get a hold of, build meaningful relationships, have conversations, get out of obscurity, find common ground, share moments with people we want to build relationships with, because in 9 months, 8 months, 12 months, 18 months, they'll know our name, know our value, know the way we operate. And at least there may be a capacity to have a conversation because we're not strangers walking into the room. So if you go to the board and they're like, how do we prove this? Maybe that analogy can help. People buy things to solve problems the same way we diagnose symptoms. We go as far as we can without calling in the expert. We go to friends, and then we dive in from there. So your job in marketing needs to be, how do we find a way to get ahead of the need? Because they're going to come to you last, or they're going to come to you pretty late. It's just how it is, right? It's just how it is. And you can either fight it and waste a shit ton of money trying to fight it and go against the tide, or you can figure out how to align with the change of times, with information being democratized, and figure out how can we support that community and how they acquire information while staying true to how we are, who we are, and what we value, right? Steph, I'll kind of open it up to you, see if you want to probe at anything, poke at anything, ask anything. I intended for this one to be a pretty short episode, but I'll open it to you, see if there's anything I'm missing or anything you want to kind of pop in there.
Yeah, I know, for this whole sort of season, we've been talking about how to align yourself within the buyer's journey. And, if we're talking that like the expert or whoever that is almost the last step in the journey, what's a good way to sort of insert yourself more organically into the earlier parts?
I mean, I would go talk to your 20, 30, 100 customers that you have and say, hey, at what point in your, walk me through the steps of how you acquired information. Mm-hmm. When did you go to vendors? I really genuinely, like, wholeheartedly mean it. If you spend time in marketing going to talk to customers and saying, look, information's everywhere, and while you ended up choosing us, we probably weren't the first place you looked. We may not even be the last place you looked, right? But I'd love to understand, as the CFO that is looking at our talent acquisition solution, and you're trying to find a way as a CFO to lower, or stabilize operating costs or retain people because it's so expensive to replace them. That's what brought you to, can you share with me the last 9, 12 months? When did this become a priority for you? Stamp that for me. Okay, so that was a priority. Can you share with me at what point you went where? Where was your first stop? Did you talk to friends? Do you have Facebook groups that you're a part of that are other financial professionals or CFOs or C-suite executives? Did you go to a trade? Like, go talk to people. And you'll, I think, really learn a lot from a standpoint of, you'll figure out how people acquire information. They may come to you and say, Steph, it's a good question. The truth is, this is something I've been thinking about for a year, but my CEO wasn't on board with it yet. So focused on other priorities. And so I was casually gathering information for about a year because I knew I wouldn't be able to make the business case to Jeff, right? Or to Sophie, because she or he was focusing on all these other priorities of the company, but I managed the numbers and I could see our operating costs, our human capital allocation was, oh boy, was that going up. And so I've been casually grabbing information. I plug into a couple podcasts. I'm in a couple Slack channels or Facebook groups. And then in March of 2021, that's where I noticed there was an opening. And that's where I took all the things I learned to build the case for change internally. And then all of a sudden you're like, got it. So you did all the research independently. So when there was an opening, you built the case for why you needed to allocate time to solve the problem.
Right.
How did we fall into? Well, because you guys have a podcast and all these cool things. I actually used a number of your white paper and ebook and that keynote that Jeff did at that summit or whatever. I used a lot of that actually to frame up the conversation. So to answer your question, go talk to your customers and learn how they went about the information gathering process. Now, once you gather the information, you have to organize it and analyze it so you can actually use it to infer and apply things you're learning. Because what you don't want to do is, okay, I talked to 7 customers and now I'm going to build my whole strategy on what those 7 people said, right? So there has to be a balance of talk to customers. But let me point this one thing out. When we say talk to customers, I'm not talking to customers and saying, tell us how to market. I'm saying talk to customers to understand how that individual and that role with those responsibilities chose to approach gathering information and approaching the capability of making a well-informed decision. Then you start to figure out, okay, is the CFO our contact in the stakeholder circle of who influences our deals? Probably if you're selling a product that's $30,000, $100,000, right? $1 million, like you got to figure who's in your circle of deals. You're talking to somebody like, well, we don't really interact with that person in the company. Okay, then it doesn't matter. So you also have to think through like who is part of the deal we're making. Talk to sales, talk to your companies. How many people are involved? Once you figure out who's involved in those deals, how those people typically gather and capture information, how it influences their process, that's where you start to have something. Now, there's a couple other things that I just with time, we're not going to dig into, but that's a really good place to start where if you have 2 months left of the year, why not go call your 10 sweetheart clients that you're like, they trust us, they love us, they'll be honest with us, and go ask, hey, I want to learn more about how you gathered information as you were looking for options. I know you chose us, but I understand it's competitive. And I want to learn what you used to build the case internally and how it influenced your process. And then you can go whiteboard it out together as a team and map it out from, the last part of it I'll say is you can ask them direct questions of at what point in your process over the last 3 years were you aware of the problem? At what point in that journey were you aware of us as a solution provider? At what point in time did you start to consider us as a potential solution for that problem? You can ask them really specific questions that you can actually build a timeline map of, okay, they were aware of the problem in 2015, but they did nothing for 5 years. They were aware of us in 2019, still didn't do anything. They were aware and starting to consider us in 2020. And then you ask them, okay, John, what changed from that second point to that third point?
Right.
And they're like, well, we saw you launch a show or a podcast. You gave us a lot more to tap into and learn. We started sharing. And that can be an incredible opportunity to learn about moments in time and where in companies' transitional periods. So I think that's probably the better way to answer your question. But I feel like I'm a broken record sometimes of go talk to customers. But your job in many cases is to align with them,
Well, I mean, how can you learn anything if you're not asking the people who bring you your business?
100%. There's a healthcare organization we're running some ads for on Facebook, and their website, their website wasn't mobile optimized, and at the time, based on like some trigger events and moments of like we were trying to capture, they opted to not allocate time or budget to update the website and say, look, if we don't have, like, well, what if we update this page on the website? I was like, look, like when you run an ad that's really native social, it's native mobile, and they go from that to a website where you're trying to convert them and it's not mobile optimized, it's kind of like driving from the highway that's paved perfectly going 65, 70, 80 if you're down south, right? And it's like going on that road and immediately getting shifted to gravel.
Sure.
You can still
Right.
drive on it, but it's impossible not to notice it. It's impossible not to create concern. And it's impossible to just assume, well, we just keep flying away.
Right.
Like, it's uncomfortable,
Mhm.
right? And we know that coming from a town with a lot of dirt roads, right? But the point being, when we explain to them, like, I kind of had a conversation like, look, you guys are trying to get them to come to you. Your job
Right.
is to meet them where they are. So instead, we built a landing page that's mobile optimized, that has an awesome video up top. It has some copy to build a value proposition and humanize it with a personal contact of the person they're going to actually talk to when the lead converts. And then beneath the form, there's a bunch of social proof of testimonials, Google reviews, where the video says, hey, if you're here, you probably just clicked our ad, and that means you're in one of these 2 or 3 positions. And look, I meet with 10 to 20 people on a weekly basis that are in the same position. And what we know are one of 2 things. Nothing's more important than making a well-informed decision. And you can't do number one if you don't start the conversation and here, and then the frames up the ad. So they never go to the website, but they get to know the face, learn about the organization, see a dozen social proof. So when they want to submit the form, it's because it's where they are. They click the ad on their phone. So it goes back to the point of, like, you got to meet your customer where they are. If you keep trying to have them come to you, it just feels like work. It's like, man, I'm coming, but I got stuff going on. Right.
Yeah. And especially if you're making big, expensive decisions, theoretically, you've already done a decent amount of work behind it. And the reason you're making those decisions is because something big and sort of crisis worthy has happened. And so you don't want to have to you don't want it to feel like extra work to get the solution to your issues.
Customer experience, there was a study that came out. I really wish I could place it. I really don't remember who. It was a joint partnership that was a research study, probably a couple years dated, but what it talked about was how employees score the value of certain things a part of their work experience. And it was by generation. So the numbers are going to be a little bit rough here, but if I go based on memory, what I recall was that baby boomers value great compensation and benefits at 56% of what they value at work. So 100% test score, 56% was benefits and compensation. This same value was about 44% for millennials. And what that study found was, where a baby boomer valued acquisition, how they were found, interviewed, onboarded, at about 3 to 4%. Millennials were about 8 to 10%. So you start to use, again, some of the information to learn about, like, people value different things. They care about different things. And so you use that information to build, okay, well, you know what? If we have a crappy onboarding process, we're already at a 90% in the most challenging labor market in history. We maybe need to think through how we're onboarding people so it feels effortless.
Right.
If millennials, which is, I think, 35% of the entire workforce, if they value onboarding and acquisition at shy of 10% of their job, how the heck do you think they feel about being onboarded as a new customer?
Right.
So again, I'm drawing a little bit on the data. But the point being, you got to make it easy for people. And the days of playing hard to get, it's over, right? You got to go position yourselves in a way that is a value add. And we can throw out all of this expensive strategy lingo. People buy things the way they solve their medical problems. They're going to do everything they can with themselves and their friend group and their trusted peer group before they go to the doctors.
Right.
Because it's a friggin' inconvenience. It's a pain in the ass to have to stop your life to go sit in a waiting room for 45 minutes, to go talk to somebody for 12 minutes, for them to tell you, we need to refer you to somebody else. That's another week away. That they then say, we need to take a test. That then takes a week to process. Like, people understand that solving problems is frustrating. It's frustrating. That's why they're, like, trained to their core. I'm going to do as much as I can on my own. Because I know once I start interacting with people, they're going to email me 72 times once I'm in their funnel. Once I put my information in, they're going to call me every day, right? They just have this taste in their mouth of like, once I open that door, it's impossible to shut.
Yeah.
So when you frame it up to your board or your leadership team, start your presentation with a story like that. People remember stories. Don't start with your data. Open it up and set it up saying, hey, the next 15 minutes, here's what I'd like to accomplish. I'd like to help us reframe our organization's approach and belief around marketing. The way buyers do things is changing. Here's an example and a story of how I'd like to frame it up that's personal, and tell the last time you were sick, or you make it personal, make it human, and then transition it into, this is where our data is today. This is where I believe we can get next year. I believe we need these people, these tools, this budget to execute on that. And I believe that we can do this, this, and this with these types of, and that's how you bring a story to life. And it's not about a strategy. It's about, how does this company do marketing? You don't need a tactic. You need an operational update in your company of what it means to market for your company. And if you can do that, I think you can not only have a really effective year end, but I think you can position your team to have a playbook. It's not about buying a software. It's like, no, we believe in what we're doing. And so from that end, it's like the more technical, and I think you'll lose people. Make it logical. People understand how they operate. Even if you hold up a mirror and they don't want to look, in many cases, it's because you're positioning it and presenting it to them in a way it's hard to like take in. You're telling them they're wrong. Don't tell them they're wrong. Just show them the reality of things. And so, Steph, anything to add before we tie up loose ends here?
I don't think so. Yeah. No, I think, we've covered a bunch of stuff. It's just listen to the information that you have, Yeah.
Make things simple for people. Stories are way more valuable than anything in this world, especially if you're presenting to your board over Zoom. Like, don't share a PowerPoint or something over Teams or Zoom or whatever and just bore people with, our organic reach is up this. We need a software that'll cost it. Tell a story, make it relatable. And then I think you're in a much better position. So everybody, thank you for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out with us. As always, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that's all we got for now. So we'll be back. You take care. Talk to you soon. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around to the end. If you liked the video, smash the like button and hit subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the new episodes. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We will fold them into future episodes and make sure that you get the help and the answers you're really looking for all things marketing and communications.